Life is short. Drive fast, leave a sexy corpse. That's one of my mottos.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Priority Holder, and today we'll be playing Grixis Self-Mill Fling in the Explorer format. Now I just have an affinity for like self-mill strategies. I've played a lot of them on this channel, and I don't know, something about filling up the graveyard and getting benefit out of it is just very satisfying to me. And so one creature that's sort of emblematic of that is Fiend Artisan. It's only a 1/1, but it gets +1/+1 for each creature in our graveyard, so it has potential to grow extremely huge. Another creature in that lineage is Cruel Somnophage, which also checks the opponent's graveyard, and newcomer Souls of the Lost. This has an additional constraint when we cast it, but actually checks all permanents in our graveyard, so benefits from lands, and is potentially way stronger than the other ones in here, so I'm excited about this one. And the way we enable these is with creature-based self-mill. So cards like Stitcher Supplier, Gnawing Vermin, Minister of Inquiries, and Merfolk Secretkeeper. And I've opted for all the most efficient 1-mana ones to get the train going and start having like 4/4, 5/5 creatures on turn 2, maybe even bigger than that depending on how things shake out. Now, I played a lot of these kind of strategies in the past, and one problem that you can often run up against is decks that can generate lots of blockers, such as like cat oven decks. You can't always get the big creatures through. And so what this deck does is has sort of like a Fling flourish, where we can just toss our giant creatures at the opponent's life total directly with Thud. And this can help us close out games that are otherwise difficult, and it just gives this deck a lot of explosive power as well, just to close the games out. And we also run 4 copies of Callous Sell-Sword. Its adventure is a pseudo Thud, though it is vulnerable to removal, so you have to make sure you do it when it's safe. But the nice thing about it is that it counts as a creature in our graveyard, so it's like on plan in that way. And a piece of technology I really like in decks like this is Claim to Fame. Now Claim's like super efficient reanimation and works on any creature in our deck, and Fame works in our graveyard, so we benefit from milling it over, and we can pump up a creature and possibly send in like a giant Fiend Artisan as a surprise attacker, or just boost him up for like the Thud damage. So anyway, let's jump into some games. Now this is an excellent hand. We have 2 1-mana milling cards to kick things off. So gonna lead with Secretkeeper. I try and grow the sort of Somnophage threats as fast as possible in case you're playing against red. Seeing an idyllic Grange though pretty much means we're playing against mono white, so we don't have to worry about damage based removal, but our Fiend Artisan's already pretty big anyway. Now we lead with Fiend Artisan because we might want to fire off Cruel Somnophage's adventure, but opponent decides to remove it and we get 2 map tokens as a consolation prize. Now my philosophy when playing this deck is to always try and keep threats on the battlefield. And so even though we're losing out on value by not playing the adventure of Cruel Somnophage, I'm going to run it out here as a 5/5. It just puts too much pressure too fast and forces the opponent to always have something. Alright, so they play Giada. So, looks like we're playing against mono white angels, seeing Giada there. Don't have much else to do, so decide to crack at least one of the map tokens to just be able to present more damage. I keep it on top because I like the other counter on Gnawing Vermin, but ultimately decide to throw the Sell-Sword into the graveyard. We already have a copy of Thud in our hand, so that's the rationale for that. Not only that, it juices up the Somnophage, so this allows both our creatures just to cruise in for a huge chunk of damage. And yeah, they don't block with Giada. It's too important to their game plan. Minister of Inquiries. We can play our tap land and pass, and we're already in like really good shape, and they're almost within reach of a Thud already. Alright, so opponent crashes in with Giada and just passes. Now Claim is an excellent draw, so we're gonna of course lead off with Minister of Inquiries self-mill, see if we can grow the Somnophage, and only add 1 more creature. Now I'm going to check here to see what kind of targets we have for Claim, and we did mill a copy of Souls of the Lost, and that combined with Thud, it could be really great. Now it is possible to use Claim, Fame, do the whole deal, but boy am I glad I didn't here, because opponent whammies us with Settle the Wreckage, and we don't even get any basics. So I'm glad I didn't try to haste out the creature and just sort of saved it. So what we're going to do now is going to claim the Souls of the Lost in the graveyard. which currently is sitting at 11 power. However, it itself will be removed from the graveyard, so it's going to shrink to 10. Fortunately, we have enough red sources to go ahead and use both Fame and Thud to get up to lethal damage. I'm just making sure the auto tapper doesn't screw me, that's why I'm sort of fiddling around with the mana. But yeah, just a clean kill against a controlling build of Angels. And that feels pretty good. Now, as we move into the next game, please remember to backlash the like button, comment, and subscribe. It supports the channel and helps you know what the people want. Thank you. Now, this hand is unfortunately a mulligan. We have a lot of enablers and also no blue mana for them. This hand's a keep, though it's sort of tricky to what to put back. So if we put back one of the red-black lands, we can cast the Secretkeeper. We can't actually cast Fiend Artisan if we cast the Secretkeeper, so ultimately I decided to put the Secretkeeper back, but I could see there possibly being another pathway there. Already a tricky mulligan decision, so green-white land, pass. Stitcher Supplier is just super strong. Alright, we're going to shock that in and go ahead and play Fiend Artisan. I'm always checking for red mana from the opponent because we want to play our Fiend Artisans once they're large enough to dodge like the typical amounts of damage that red can deal, or that green can often fight. But it looks like we're facing another Angels deck, and the fact that they're touching green means they're probably running Collected Company. Now you notice I attacked with the, chump attacked with the Stitcher Supplier. It's because it's going to grow our threats so quickly, especially with the second Fiend Artisan. They're both just massive now. Honestly, it's probably in opponent's best interest to not block there, but it's tough, you know, because you're trying to save damage, but ultimately I think it's going to contribute to even more damage coming at them. Alright, so opponent has Righteous Valkyrie. Normally a pretty scary card to face, but we already have two 6/6s in play. And Cruel Somnophage is great. We're going to lead with the Minister of Inquiry's Self-Mill to see how big our creatures get, and we hit 2 copies of Fame. Now, if we had an extra mana, we could run out Somnophage and haste it out there with Fame. Trying to decide what to do, once again, if you have enough mana, of course you do the adventure for Somnophage, but so often when you're just trying to apply pressure, you often don't cast the adventure portion. And that's the way this deck is sort of built, is to let all of your 1 mana millers do all the heavy lifting so that your creatures are already juiced up. So Somnophage's adventure is just sort of like a nice bonus from time to time, but opponent chumps with the Righteous Valkyrie and gets a spirit token as a consolation prize, and they just play another Righteous Valkyrie. So they keep buffering their life total, and this is a problem with these self-mill decks. We can create these giant creatures, but it's possible for people to just chump them over and over again. So they have like a spirit token creating loop. Now we are putting them under immense pressure right here. They're not gonna be able to do it forever, but there are decks decks that run that cat oven that sort of can do it forever. So that's why I really like the flourish of Fling spells, because it helps you close out situations where it's hard to get through on the ground. So opponent makes these blocks, and they're in pretty massive trouble. We knocked them to 4 life, and they're having to basically just constantly chump block basically this whole game. And I gotta say, it feels nice to beat up on Angels, because this is the kind of Angels often beats up on the more wacky decks I try and make sometimes. Opponent has to bolt that land in and plays another Angel. So I mean they can block for quite a long time at this point. Now we draw land number 4, which is great. That gives us some options to do with Tenacious Underdog. I really like blitzing it here. It's not the best attacker, but I'm really prioritizing the card draw. Maybe jigging us into a Fling spell or another threat. And that's the rationale here. Plus it puts itself in the graveyard. And, just casually swinging for 30-something, 40 damage here. So opponent misses a free block on the Tenacious Underdog. Could have saved themselves 3 life. But they're still getting some spirits, and they're not dead yet. They're gaining so much off each Angel. Fortunately, with the Underdog dying, we do get a Fling spell drawn. So that's going to help us, because just sort of the unique draw from the opponent, they're able to just keep chumping But, you know, like right now we have almost 3 creatures that are like lethal threats. So I'm about to fire off the adventure, and then I don't know if they actually have any, they probably don't have any instant speed life gain or something like that. So I decide, just for due diligence, to use the pump spell and then the fling spell. So then we use burn together on the Somnophage to clean to finish up the job, and turns out the extra 3 damage they could have blocked didn't matter. So on to the next one. This hand is incredible. Only one payoff, but a lot of enablers. So I typically like to lead with Minister of Inquiries because it's summoning sick and needs a turn to get going. And wow, look at that. So playing against a red aggro deck, and they can't even attack with their Monastery Swiftsword because we have a 1/2. So feels pretty good. All right, mill some stuff, and we drew a Souls of the Lost. So the question is, whether we play that or Somnophage, and right now Souls has an extra point of toughness, and I really value that against red and their damage-based removal. Plus, if we pitch a creature as part of its additional cost, we can grow it even more. So right now, like, they're gonna have a hard time dealing with it. I mean, Swiftspear can grow, but the opponent just plays Dreadhorde Arcanist and passes, and it's gonna get real nasty for them because our creature's gonna grow massive right here. So Souls, you know, grows with lands as well, not just creatures, so it's gonna get untenable for them. And I'm thinking about what they cast, and the opponent just packs in. Like, they can't beat creatures that big that early. They haven't even done any damage to us yet. And I eventually was going to slam another threat. It just, by the time I realized it, the game was already over. So on to the next one. Opponent leads on a turn 1 cleric class, and they fire off Revitalize. So some sort of life gain shenanigans going on over there, and trying to figure out what to do. And so once again, seeing that the opponent presumably doesn't have damage-based removal, I'm going to slam Fiend Artisan. We haven't gotten to play any enablers yet, no self-mill, but that can happen next turn with at least Secret Keeper, possibly something else. Alright, so there's Prosperous Innkeeper, so the life game theme showing through for the opponent. I'm going to fire off Secret Keeper here. Now this is a little trickier spot because, like I said, I often like slamming threats and not usually using the adventure portion of Cruel Somnophage, but we actually don't have any other sources of self-mill at the moment, so this is a little bit ambitious because we don't have any other ways currently to grow our creatures. Alright, so opponent plays another life gain enabler. So I'm thinking that they're playing like a Johnny's Pridemates or Trelisara or something like that, especially with the Chapter 2 of Cleric class being able to sort of grant that ability to everything. So we'll have to see, but so far it looks like all enablers from the opponent. Now we're going to cast Secret Keeper and sacrifice it to Souls. It's going to grow our creatures, and we want to keep the cards in hand. It could become useful. So we crash in, and the opponent just takes it. I guess they're prioritizing their creatures over what shenanigans we can. I'm just reviewing what Cleric class does. Slam Mana Confluence. And this is an investment in the future right here. I'm going to go ahead and claim a Minister of Inquiries. It removes a creature from our graveyard right now, but I'm hoping that it'll more than make up for it with its 2 activations we get from it. So that was the rationale there. Alright, opponent has a Minimus Containment on our Souls of the Lost. So gonna of course lead with Minister of Inquiries, see if we can grow our creatures. We can do that like mid-combat, but I like sort of knowing, you know, if the combat's questionable, I want to know going into it. Alright, so that was a whiff, unfortunately. So now I decide ultimately to crack the clue that is Souls of the Lost and use its own mana to claim it back into play. It seems like such a worthwhile threat to have against them. Now I'm going to go ahead and fame the Cruel Somnophage so it's a better attacker. And my intent was to play Aether Hub and fame the Souls as well, but I forgot to do it. So this turn got flubbed a little bit. Like, you could see me hesitate a bit there when I realized that Souls can't attack. The opponent just tanks the damage there. We haven't seen much on their end, like, I don't know if they're trying to develop still. Alright, so they finally get level 2 at Cleric class. So it basically turns all their creatures into a Johnny's Pridemates. But it seems like too little too late. Like, they wanted that 1 or 2 turns ago, and then we would have had a hard time attacking some things through. But as of now, the opponent's in big trouble. Yeah, and they decide just to let the damage through, and we lock up that win against life gain. Alright. This is another great looking hand. No red mana, but no red cards at the moment. Alright, red black land. Gonna go ahead and leave Minister of Inquiries. It is sort of a toss-up whether you want Minister or Merfolk Secretkeeper turn 1 versus red. Because they could just burn the Minister and then we don't get as much activation. This person let us actually activate first, which is maybe a mistake if they're going to do it anyways. They shouldn't have let us untap with it. So, because we were able to get a game plan going, and luckily for us, hit enough to grow our creatures outside of typical burn. So I'm thinking about what to play here. Almost run out Souls of Lost, but didn't really want to get rid of any resource right now. I would much rather sacrifice like a Secret Keeper to it instead of discarding a land. Waste Not from the opponent. I love discard decks, so this warms my heart seeing a Waste Not on the other side of the battlefield. I've made a few videos. I'll link a couple right now. But yeah, love the discard strategies. But right now we're on the self-mill, and it's looking pretty grim for the opponent right here. We have a 7/7 that's going to smack them, and you know it could swiftly come to an end if they have like a fatal push or something. Now I really want to play Souls of the Lost here. However, we have to discard a card against an active Waste Not. So I decide pitching a land is like the safest thing to do, and I'm really braced myself, like hoping they don't have a fatal push right here or 2. But the opponent does not get to use the mana, so that's a good sign for us. Alright, so they slam Liliana, presumably going to -2 her to Edict us. Yeah, and we're of course going to sacrifice the smaller one, but it's going to grow Souls Lost, and I'm bracing myself for removal, but it's a Thoughtseize, which is pretty worst case scenario for them because they lose the life. Anyway, we could also blitz the Tenacious Underdog and attack him with both, but Secret Keeper off the top means it's an easy just self-mill for the kill. Sorry about that Waste Not player, but we gotta lock up those wins and we got them. Well, that was super fun. You could see why I love the self-mill strategy. I mean, we were just having just slamming our opponents with giant creatures early and often. Like, it's surprising how fast they can grow sometimes and just overwhelm the opponent's defenses. One thing that I spent a lot of time thinking about is like our graveyard value flex spot. So I have Tenacious Underdog in here right now. In the past, I'd often use Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, which can escape and just give us some extra reach in the long game. I still like Kroxa a lot, but I realized it's at odds with Souls of the Lost. Even if we're just exiling lands to escape it, we're going to shrink souls. So opted just to keep it on the sidelines for now. You can also consider Skyclave Shade, so it's sort of up to you like what your graveyard value flex spot is occupied with. Often played green in the past for these strategies because we have another threat in Urborg Lurgoyf and other self-mill enablers like Satyr Wayfinder, so that's one thing to consider. Also, I thought about playing Voldaren Thrillseeker as like another creature-based way to fling damage, but I kept it on the sidelines because it doesn't work with Claim, so there possibly is another way to build this one. And another thing to remember is that all these creatures fit under the umbrella of Collected Company, so that could be another way to play the deck as well. You have to make sure all your things work with like Enter the Battlefield abilities. So, but yeah, this deck's just super fun. I'm always tinkering with different versions of it. I have a lot, I think like 10 different versions saved right now that I've been working on. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what's your favorite creature that grows with your graveyard? Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.